Alright, here we are with the first round, and our first hand is already an interesting one. It's the classic 5 land, 2 spells. Um, so, important points are that we're on the play here, which makes Remand much better. If we were on the draw, I would not keep this ever. I don't think, unless we were up against like the mirror or something. We don't know what we're up against. I think on the play though, this is a difficult decision, and I lean towards keeping it. I don't know if it's right. The lands are useful. We have Colonnade, which is really good in the late game if we do flood out. We have at least a turn 2 play, and that turn 2 play can draw us into more gas potentially, and then Snapcaster Remand is also pretty good on the play, or we could find a bolt or something for Snapcaster and be basically set. So keep, and we see we're up against a Swift Spear, which is most likely Death Shadow. Draw Bolt, which is pretty much the perfect draw, and decide to leave up Remand since we want to be mana efficient, and this Swift Spear isn't actually a huge problem. If we are up against Death Shadow, immediately bolting Swift Spear isn't a huge deal, because they're more of like a combo deck rather than a burn deck, and we get rewarded by being able to remand a Manamorphose and draw another remand. So we've drawn now 3 non-lands, which is perfect for this hand. And Commandeer is one of them, which, I mean, is a card. Probably not one we really want in this matchup, though. So we're trying to Lightning Bolt Monastery Swift Spear, and obviously we do it on our turn because of Pump. We don't want the Swift Spear to get bigger when it's attacking us for no reason. And it turns out our opponent does have Mutagenic Growth. Now, we have our own Remand, so we could Remand the Mutagenic Growth, but that does nothing because it's a free spell. Instead, we're going to Remand our own Bolt here, so it's like we drew a Bolt and cycled the Remand. Unfortunately, we're tapped out, but on the plus side, we do have Commandeer. But the problem with that being, if our opponent casts Become Immense or Tamir Battle Rage, we can Commandeer it and then choose the same target and die. So, yeah. Well, there's a Commandeer target. I don't think it's worth it to Commandeer Mishra's Bauble. Quite possibly one of the most hilarious Commandeer targets. A 0 drop for 3 of your cards. But we just let our opponent have that. And there's Manamorphose. So now I'm worried about just dying, because Tamir Battle Rage and Become Immense more than kills us. The problem, so our options are let Manamorphose resolve and possibly die, or Commandeer Manamorphose. We actually get mana for Bolt, and although it won't be useful for killing Monastery Swift Spear because this prowess will have already resolved. But we could draw into, say, another Remand or a Path to Exile off the Manamorphose. And it's unlikely our opponent kills us anyway, since they'll have wasted 2 mana. So the problem with the Commandeer play is we're getting rid of Snapcaster Mage and Remand, which is basically our long-term game plan. So we're relying on the top of our deck to outdraw our opponent versus just dying to Manamorphose this turn. Dying to the Manamorphose, resolving, and Swift Spear killing us this turn with enablers. So I leaned towards Commandeer. I'm not sure what the correct play is. It seems like both options have pros and cons, but Commandeering Manamorphose is a much cooler play, so I went with that. And I think it might be slightly right here. There's value in just not dying this turn and then being able to kill the Swift Spear, which might be our opponent's only creature, and we're creeping towards Colonnade Mana as well, which is useful. So we get Thoughtseized, and unfortunately we are drawing lands, so it looked like it would have been much better to roll the dice and hope we don't die. Commandeer is, by the way, not proving itself to be a most valuable player, since it basically made us pitch 2 good cards to steal a bad card. It made us do it, I tells ya. And there's Death Shadow. And Torrential Gearhulk, unfortunately, comes a little bit too late, or too early. Not too late, but not on turn 6. It should have been Cryptic Command this turn, and then Torrential Gearhulk. So we are dead. And at 0. We weren't technically dead, but we were very likely dead. And it turns out our opponent did have lethal. So for sideboarding against Death Shadow is a very tricky matchup, I find, with Jeskai. You have to... it's a delicate balancing act for both players that I feel favors the Death Shadow player. They're trying to get low enough to kill you with Death Shadow, and you're trying to find an opening to burn them out if they get a bit too low. So you want early interaction. So the first cuts would be among these. Obviously we're getting rid of Commandeer. So would cut those and then start looking at cutting the counters. Cryptic Command is surprisingly good against Death Shadow, especially when you're on the play, because it essentially fogs and draws a card, which is really good when you're just trying to buy time to burn them out. And they don't really have any good interaction for Cryptic Command or ways to get around it. Other than that, I think Electrolyze is not that great as well, so it would slightly be on the chopping block, and same with Anger, but I think you'd want everything else. So it's just a matter of finding the right configuration. Shadow of Doubt is actually fine on the play. Engineered Explosives, great. Dispel, great. Relic, good against Become Immense, so I think it's kind of worth it. Negates are okay as well, and Static Caster actually doesn't have that many targets, so I don't think you want that. So I think we would lean towards the Electrolyzes being good, since they can pick things off or just kill the opponent if they're low enough, and same with the Angers. So that's 8 and 8. Honestly though, on the play, Mana Leak might be better, or Mana Leak might just be better than Negate in general. Negate is nice in the really long drawn out matches against Death Shadow, which do happen, but I think on the play I would definitely lean towards Mana Leak and bring these in and bring these out. I think I may have kept in Negates though over Mana Leaks for this match. where our opening hand is this. Again, another 5-lander with 2 solid spells, one of which is Serum Visions, and we're on the play, so I would again lean towards keeping it, although I'm not exactly happy about it. But Path is good. Serum Visions will hopefully find us gas. So yeah. And we obviously lead on Serum Visions and draw a bolt, find Engineered Explosives, and see, we're kind of in business. And we get Thought Seized of our Path. So our opponent doesn't know about this Engineered Explosives. Now they do. And they decide to Death Shadow. So we're just willing to thin the deck there and try and find gas, which we do not find. So the game started okay, but then we didn't really draw any. Like another Serum Visions or a Snapcaster would have been what we want, or even a Cryptic Command to continue cycling, because right now we're relying on a removal. So in this position, we know that Death Shadow usually isn't good at burning you out, and Engineered Explosives is actually amazing against them, since they can't pump up their guys. They can only just keep attacking with them. So leaving Engineered Explosives around and forcing them to commit more creatures before you blow it is really good. So I'm just happy to take all this Death Shadow damage. I might consider blowing the Engineered Explosives if we had more gas in our hand, but right now we're basically, this Engineered Explosives is the only thing keeping us in the game. And like, now our opponent didn't play anything, which is great that they didn't have a like a Tarmogoyf, a 2-drop that would have got around our Engineered Explosives. But that's the way we had to play, and it paid off. So see, our opponent has 5 cards in hand and is willing to commit a Monastery Swift Spear to the explosives for free, just to try and get it off the battlefield. And we are even willing to not blow up our Engineered Explosives here. That's how much we are relying on it right now. Because if our opponent's hand is Become Immenses and Tamir Battle Rages and 1-drops, like a Tamir Battle Rage or Become Immense and 2 1-drops, it's much better to have the Engineered Explosives in play right now, rather than them dropping those 2 cards and killing us next turn. Like, now we drew Serum Visions and can possibly assemble something. So, yep, drew Cryptic Command, Electrolyze and Serum Visions on top, and we're going to keep both, drawing the Serum Visions first, and then chaining off into some more card draw, and hopefully lethal, since our opponent is pretty low, and now we can start buying time with Cryptic Command or Engineered Explosives. And here, now that I have a little bit of gas in the form of Cryptic Command, which also is kind of a similar type of fog to Engineered Explosives, in that it doesn't allow the pump to kill us, I'm willing to pop the Engineered Explosives just in case our opponent drew like a Tarmogoyf, where if we tapped with the Cryptic Command and then our opponent played Tarmogoyf, we wouldn't have an answer to the Tarmogoyf next turn. Whereas if we keep Cryptic Command, we have an answer to Tarmogoyf. And our opponent doesn't actually have Tarmogoyf, but that was the reasoning. And here we hit Engineered Explosives and Snapcaster Mage off our Serum Visions to go with Electrolyze, which is going to be lethal if this Cryptic Command just buys us a turn. So we keep the Snapcaster and set up lethal with the Lightning Bolt and Electrolyze. And tap down works as expected. And here our opponent actually did have Tarmogoyf, which would have killed us if we had have tapped down with Cryptic Command and saved the explosives. We would have walked into that if our opponent had have top decked it. But instead, we just win and go to game 3, and here we have the reverse of what we had before: 5 spells, 2 lands, which I usually much prefer to the 5 lands, 2 spells, especially when we have some cycle. So this is a great hand. We are on the draw though, and our opponent goes Mishra's Bauble, no land, and then types whoops lol into the chat, so they forgot to play their land. So we got to be on the play all 3 of our games, and this one we even got an extra draw. So we hit some more lands to get up to Cryptic Command mana, and our opponent starts playing their lands. And Tarmogoyf is actually a huge problem for this hand, because we only have our 3 damage spells. But we are off to a good start otherwise. And here, I could have double helixed the Tarmogoyf. I could have bolt helixed the Tarmogoyf, but if our opponent had have had mutagenic growth, it would have survived, and that would have been such a blowout. I just decided to pass the turn, because again, we're trying to not get killed through any sort of combo shenanigans with Tamir Battle Rage Become Immense. A little bit of early damage isn't actually the end of the world, so we're gonna assess the situation, leave up Dispel to make sure we don't die, and then possibly consider trying to kill the Tarmogoyf at the end of our opponent's turn instead. So they do a whole bunch of baloney that loses them a bunch of life and sees our hand and hits with the Tarmogoyf, and there's Death Shadow. So here I have a whole lot of different options. Our opponent's starting to get low, so it's the dance of the deadly Death Shadow dance of death is occurring. Our opponent is trying to kill us, we're trying to kill our opponent, and we're both trying to like slow roll our kills and wait for the other person to mess up. Because if our opponent were to drop to 6, they would be dead, and if we give our opponent an opening, then we will die. So here I have basically, I'm not sure what to do here, but in hindsight, I think maybe I should have just pointed all the burn at my opponent's face and tapped down with Cryptic Command, because then another piece of burn would have basically won us the game. If we had have drawn another bolt, we could go bolt, Snapcaster, bolt, and our opponent would be at 6, and we would have a whole turn to give ourselves a whole turn with Cryptic Command. Instead, I decided to Lightning Helix the Death Shadow. My reasoning for that being, if our opponent wants to save the Death Shadow, they're going to have to pay life anyways, although they could just hard cast mutagenic growth, which would have been an issue as well. Instead, they have the Blossoming Defense, which was not something I was considering, but I decided to dispel that as well and start doling out some of my resources and trading them. So it's kind of like that Lightning Helix was a Searing Blaze that gained us life and dealt our opponent 2 damage. So here our plan is to Cryptic Command and hope we draw something good. Um, Actually, though, I remember thinking about that for a long time, considering the cryptic command play, and deciding it would lead to my losses a lot more frequently, because our next turn would be so bad if we cryptic command this turn. Generally, when you have 4 mana, you're thinking cryptic command, which was my first thought as well. But I decided there's a decent chance I could die this turn, since our opponent's just attacking us for 10, and all we have up is either Cryptic Command or Dispel. But the problem with tapping down with Cryptic Command is, what do we do if we don't draw anything? We're going to almost certainly die our next turn if we Cryptic Command this turn and don't find another Cryptic Command. So I let my opponent act first and hope they can't kill us, and that Cryptic Command can, or Dispel can mess them up. So here I cast Cryptic Command to bounce the Tarmogoyf and counter the Tamir Battle Rage, which is the safest play and should keep Tarmogoyf off the board for next turn. And our opponent Death Shadows. And we find Path, which deals with the board and presents a threat as well in Snapcaster Mage. Unfortunately, we know Tarmogoyf is coming down next turn, so our Snapcaster Mage won't likely be attacking. But now we're almost up to 6 mana for Snapcaster Flashback Cryptic Command. Alright, Manamorphose coming into play, Tarmogoyf coming down. So this Swift Spear is a 2/3, and I just decided to take it. If our opponent did become immense, we could Lightning Bolt the Monastery Swift Spear. We lose to mutagenic growth as well, but I was willing to take that risk. And another path is excellent. So we're going to path the Tarmogoyf to start, and again just leave this up because we're going to almost certainly win next turn if our opponent has very little and doesn't kill us. So decide to block this time. Our opponent does have mutagenic growth finally, and instead of doing anything like path, I'm willing to just let that resolve. Or maybe not. I do decide to path here, thinking my opponent won't have like Apostle's Blessing, another Blossoming Defense, and Tamir Battle Rage, which would kill us, because if I were to not draw a land for Colonnade, I couldn't like, if our opponent did nothing, I could have just went Bolt Face, Snapcaster Mage, draw a land, Colonnade. But while we might die with this play, it allows us to have 2 creatures on the board. I'm not sure if I'm in love with this play. And our opponent, again, has a strange card in Bedlam Reveler. And, alright, we knew Snapcaster was on the top from our Serum Visions. So, we knew we had lethal through this Bedlam Reveler. And we just bolt and Snapcaster and win. Executed excellently.